Have you ever felt a presence in an empty room? That subtle shift in the air when you're certain you're alone, yet somehow you're not? I never believed in such things until I inherited my grandmother's estate in rural Vermont. What happened there changed me forever. And it might change you too. So turn down your lights, get comfortable, and prepare yourself for what I'm about to share. Just remember, some things, once known, can never be unknown. And if you make it to the end, I'd love to hear your theories about what really haunts the old Blackwood estate. Now, let me tell you my story. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. November in Chicago brings a special kind of cold that seeps into your bones, and I was warming my hands around a mug of coffee when I heard the mail slot clatter. The thick cream envelope stood out among the bills and advertisements. My name, Alexandra Miller, written in unfamiliar handwriting that somehow felt important. Miss Miller, it read, we regret to inform you of the passing of Eleanor Blackwood. As her sole surviving relative, you have inherited the Blackwood estate in Harlow's End, Vermont, along with all assets and possessions therein. I nearly dropped my coffee. Grandmother Eleanor? The mysterious relative my mother had mentioned only in whispers? The one who had supposedly disowned our entire family decades ago? This can't be right, I muttered to my empty apartment. My mother had died 3 years prior, never reconciling with her estranged mother. I'd never even met the woman, and now I owned her house? 3 weeks later, I stood at the entrance of a long, winding driveway, staring up at what could only be described as the quintessential New England mansion. 3 stories of weathered Victorian architecture, complete with a widow's walk, wraparound porch, and more windows than I cared to count. Each one seemed to watch me as I approached. The attorney who'd sent the letter, a Mr. Winters with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetual frown, waited on the porch. Miss Miller, you're late. Traffic from Burlington was worse than expected, I said, though in truth I'd circled the property twice, gathering courage to enter. Indeed. He extended a heavy iron key. The estate includes the main house, the grounds, approximately 40 acres, and a small trust for maintenance. Your grandmother was particular about preservation. The foyer smelled of lemon polish and something older, like pages of books no one had opened in years. A grand staircase curved upward, and heavy drapes framed windows that should have let in more light than they did. The house has been in the Blackwood family for 7 generations, Mr. Winters continued, his voice echoing slightly. Your grandmother was adamant it remain in family hands. Why me? I asked. We never even met. Mr. Winters adjusted his glasses. Your grandmother had her reasons. She left this for you as well. He handed me an envelope, my name written in the same elegant script as the letter. I'll leave you to get acquainted with the property. The utilities are on, and the pantry is stocked. Mrs. Peterson from town comes to clean weekly. Call my office if you need anything else. And then he was gone, leaving me alone in a house that had belonged to my family for generations, yet felt completely foreign. The envelope in my hand suddenly seemed heavier than paper should be. Inside was a single page with just 3 sentences. Alexandra, the house is now yours, as it should be. There are things you need to know, but the house must show you in its own time. Whatever you do, don't go into the east wing after dark. I read it twice, then a 3rd time. A warning? A test? Or the ramblings of an elderly woman? That first night, I chose a bedroom on the 2nd floor overlooking the sprawling back gardens. I unpacked my small suitcase, placing my laptop on an antique writing desk that probably cost more than my car. My modern belongings looked out of place among the heavy furniture and faded wallpaper. As I settled into the unfamiliar bed, the house seemed to settle too, creaking and sighing as old houses do. Nothing unusual, I told myself, just normal house sounds, until I heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps moving across the floor above me. The 3rd floor, where I hadn't yet explored, Tap, pause, tap, pause, tap. I froze, listening intently as they moved from one end of the ceiling to the other, then stopped right above my bed. "Hello," I called out, immediately feeling foolish. I was alone in the house. Mr. Winters had confirmed as much. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the footsteps. I reached for my phone, its screen illuminating the darkness. 3:17 a.m. Then came a sound I still struggled to describe, somewhere between a sigh and a whisper, a single word that might have been welcome or beware. I couldn't be sure. Sleep didn't come until the first light of dawn crept through the heavy curtains. My first week at Blackwood Estate passed in a blur of exploration and cataloging. The house was massive. Over 30 rooms spread across 3 floors, not counting the cellar. Each room was meticulously preserved, as if frozen in time. Family portraits lined the hallways. Stern faces of Blackwoods past staring down with expressions ranging from mild disapproval to outright contempt. I found my mother in one of them, younger than I'd ever seen her in photographs, perhaps 16, standing stiffly beside an elegant woman I assumed was Eleanor. Neither was smiling. The library became my sanctuary. 2 stories of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with everything from first editions of American classics to obscure texts on subjects I'd never heard of. I spent hours there, learning about the family I'd never known. The Blackwoods had been among the first settlers of Harlow's End in the late 1700s. They'd made their fortune in timber, then later in manufacturing during the Industrial Revolution. But the family history took a darker turn in the early 1900s. Mentions of accidents, disappearances, and estrangements peppered the family records. And then there was the East Wing, the one place grandmother Eleanor had explicitly warned against. During daylight, I found nothing particularly threatening there, just more bedrooms, a music room with a dust-covered grand piano, and a locked door at the end of the hallway for which I could find no key. "What are you hiding?" I murmured to the house one afternoon, running my fingers along the locked door's frame. The wood felt warmer than it should have, almost like skin. I tried asking Mrs. Peterson, the housekeeper, about the family history during her weekly visit. "The Blackwoods kept to themselves mostly," she said as she dusted shelves that already looked immaculate. "Your grandmother more than most. And the East Wing? Why would she warn me about it?" Mrs. Peterson's hands stilled momentarily. "Some parts of old houses are better left undisturbed, Miss Miller. Time to check the linens." She scurried away before I could press further. That night, I dreamed of the locked door. In my dream, it stood slightly ajar, a sliver of blue light spilling from within. As I approached, I could hear humming, a woman's voice, singing a lullaby I almost recognized. I woke with a start to find myself standing in the East Wing hallway, my hand outstretched toward the locked door. The grandfather clock downstairs chimed 3 times. 3 a.m. Heart pounding, I backed away. Had I sleepwalked? I'd never done that before. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A portrait I hadn't noticed before, hanging in the shadows. A young woman in early 1900s dress, her expression softer than the other Blackwood portraits. Around her neck hung a key on a ribbon. The next day, I searched the house with renewed purpose, looking for the key from the portrait. I found it in the afternoon, tucked inside a hollowed-out book in the library. The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. How fitting. The key was brass, tarnished with age, its design intricate and unusual. It seemed to hum with potential in my palm. I knew exactly where it belonged, but I remembered my grandmother's warning. So I waited for morning. Whatever was behind that door had waited decades. It could wait a few more hours. That night, the sounds began again, but different this time. Not footsteps, but a scratching, like fingernails against wood. It moved from the walls to my bedroom door, persistent and deliberate. Scratch, scratch, scratch. then a soft thud, as if something had leaned against the door. "Who's there?" I called out, clutching my blankets. The scratching stopped immediately. Then came a sound like muffled crying. A woman, or perhaps a child, heartbroken and lost. Against every instinct screaming at me to stay put, I got out of bed and approached the door. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, announcing every step. The crying continued. With trembling fingers, I placed my hand on the doorknob. The metal was ice cold. I turned it slowly and pulled. The hallway was empty, but the air felt thick, charged with something I couldn't name. The crying had stopped, but as I peered into the darkness, I could have sworn I saw movement at the far end, a swirl of fabric, perhaps, disappearing around the corner towards the east wing. I didn't follow. Instead, I closed and locked my door, then pushed a chair against it for good measure. Sleep didn't come again that night. The next morning, I called the only person I thought might understand, my college roommate Olivia, who'd studied paranormal psychology before switching to regular clinical practice. "I'm not saying it's a ghost," I told her after explaining the situation, "but something strange is definitely happening here. Could be old pipes or the house settling," Olivia suggested, ever practical. "Or could be residual energy. Old houses absorb emotions over time, especially trauma." "And the sleepwalking? The crying?" "Sleep disturbances aren't uncommon when you're in a new environment. As for the crying, are you sure you weren't dreaming?" I wasn't sure of anything anymore. "What about the locked door? Should I open it?" "During daylight with someone else present," she advised. "Actually, why don't I drive up this weekend? Burlington to Harlow's End isn't that far." Relief washed over me. "That would be amazing. Just try to document anything unusual in the meantime. Times, locations, what you were doing when it happened." After hanging up, I felt more grounded. Having a plan helped. I set up a notebook dedicated to tracking the strange occurrences and began methodically going through family records, looking for any mention of unusual events in the house. That afternoon, I found it, tucked in a shoebox of old photographs in the attic. A newspaper clipping from 1912. Tragedy at Blackwood Estate. Young mother takes own life. The article was brief, mentioning only that Eliza Blackwood, aged 22, had been found dead in the east wing of the family home, leaving behind her husband Thomas and infant daughter Eleanor. Eleanor, my grandmother. The photo accompanying the article showed the same young woman from the portrait with the key. Eliza had been beautiful, with kind eyes that seemed at odds with the stern Blackwood lineage. I was so engrossed in my discovery that I didn't notice the sun setting. By the time I made my way downstairs, darkness had fallen. And I realized with a start that I was in the east wing. Just as I turned to leave, all the lights went out. "Perfect timing," I muttered, fumbling for my phone. The flashlight cast eerie shadows as I made my way down the hallway, moving faster than I'd care to admit. Then I heard it. The humming from my dream. A lullaby, soft and sweet, coming from behind the locked door. It stopped abruptly as I approached. "Hello?" My voice sounded small in the darkness. "Is someone there?" The brass key felt heavy in my pocket. I knew I should wait for Olivia, wait for daylight. But something pulled me forward. Curiosity, or perhaps something stronger. Before I could reconsider, I was fitting the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, as if recently oiled. The door swung open on silent hinges. The room beyond was a nursery, perfectly preserved. A wooden crib stood in the center, a rocking chair beside it. Toys from another era were arranged on shelves, and a beautiful mobile of hand-carved birds hung above the crib. But what struck me most was the temperature. While the rest of the house had been cool, this room was warm, and it smelled of lavender and vanilla, like the lotion my own mother used to wear. As I stepped fully into the room, the door closed behind me with a soft click. The only light came from moonlight filtering through lace curtains, casting patterns across the floor. That's when I saw her, a figure in the rocking chair, head bent as if gazing at something in her arms. She wore a white nightgown, and her dark hair was loose around her shoulders. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, could barely breathe. She hadn't acknowledged me yet, just kept rocking gently, humming that lullaby again. Finally, I managed to whisper, "Eliza?" The rocking stopped. Slowly, she raised her head. I expected a grotesque vision, something from a nightmare. But her face was beautiful, sad, and terribly human. Tears streaked her cheeks, and her eyes, so like my own, held a sorrow too deep for words. "You can see me," she said, her voice surprisingly clear. "No one has seen me in so long." The bundle in her arms, I now realized, was empty blankets. She followed my gaze and smiled sadly. "They took her from me. Said I wasn't well enough to care for her. They were going to send me away, separate us forever." A chill ran through me despite the room's warmth. "Eleanor? My grandmother?" Eliza nodded. "My beautiful girl. I couldn't bear to leave her. So I stayed, but they told her I abandoned her, that I was selfish." Her form flickered slightly, like a television with poor reception. She'd grew up hating me, never knowing I was here, watching over her. I thought of the stern woman in the portraits, raised by people who had lied to her about her mother. No wonder Eleanor had been distant, cold even to her own daughter. "The official story was suicide," I said carefully. "Is that what happened?" Eliza's expression darkened, the room's temperature dropping suddenly. "Thomas happened. My husband. He couldn't risk the scandal of a wife with melancholia. Easier to say I took my own life than admit he held the pillow over my face while I begged for my daughter." The lights in the room flickered violently, and the mobile above the crib began to spin. The rocking chair moved faster, though Eliza no longer seemed to be controlling it. "I tried to warn Eleanor when she returned with her own child, your mother, but I couldn't reach her. The same darkness that took me was growing in Thomas, even in his old age." My blood ran cold. Did he hurt them too? He tried. One night, I managed to manifest enough to push him down the main staircase. They called it an accident. Eleanor and your mother left the next day, never to return until Eleanor came back, decades later, alone. The pieces were falling into place. Why my mother never spoke of her childhood, why she'd left home and never looked back. But if grandmother Eleanor didn't believe in you, why did she warn me about the East Wing? Eliza's form became more solid as she stood, the empty blankets falling to the floor. Because in her final years, she finally saw me. We made our peace. She knew I would never hurt a Blackwood woman, but the house holds other energies. Thomas is still here too, in the shadows, in the scratching at your door. As if summoned by his name, the temperature plummeted further. The door behind me rattled violently. Something wanted in. "He's stronger at night," Eliza said urgently. "That's why she warned you. You need to go, now." The door burst open before I could reach it, slamming against the wall with such force that plaster cracked. But the hallway beyond was empty, or seemed to be until I noticed the shadows moving against the wall, forming a vaguely human shape. Eliza placed herself between me and the darkness. "Leave her be, Thomas. She's innocent in all this." The shadow grew, stretching toward the ceiling. A deep voice emerged, more felt than heard, vibrating through my chest. "Blackwood blood. Mine." "Run," Eliza whispered to me. "To the library, the south wall. Find the journal." I hesitated, unwilling to leave her to face this alone, but the shadow surged forward, and the choice was made for me. I bolted past it, feeling an arctic chill as I brushed against its edge. The hallway seemed endless as I ran, the floorboards creaking protests beneath my feet. Behind me, I heard crashes and the sound of glass shattering. The whole house seemed to be waking up, responding to the confrontation in the nursery. I reached the library gasping for breath and slammed the door. The south wall was covered in bookshelves. "The journal," I muttered. "Which journal?" As if in answer, a single book fell from the top shelf, landing with a thud at my feet. Bound in faded red leather, its pages yellowed with age. No title, just a symbol embossed on the cover. A tree with roots that looked almost like reaching hands. I opened it with trembling fingers to find entries dating back to the house's construction. The journal of the first Blackwood. Page after page detailed the preparations made during the building. Rituals performed, sacrifices buried in the foundation, deals struck with forces better left unnamed. "The land requires payment," one entry read. "Blood freely given strengthens. Blood forcibly taken corrupts. Each generation must understand this balance." The Blackwoods hadn't just built a house, they'd created a conduit, a place where the veil between worlds thinned. And Thomas had corrupted it with violence, turning a place of power into something twisted. The final entry was in different handwriting, Eleanor's, I realized. "Alexandra will come when I'm gone. The house has shown me. She has the gift, as Eliza did, as I discovered too late in myself. The cycle can end with her if she's brave enough. The cornerstone must be cleansed. I've left what she'll need in the place where Eliza first showed herself to me." The rocking chair. I needed to get back to the nursery. A thunderous crash from upstairs suggested time was running out. The entire house was shaking now. Picture frames falling from walls, books tumbling from shelves. Whatever confrontation was happening between Eliza and Thomas was affecting the physical world. I forced myself to return to the east wing. The journal clutched against my chest. The nursery door hung from a single hinge, and inside, chaos reigned. Furniture levitated. The crib splintered into pieces before my eyes. And in the center of it all, Eliza stood like the eye of a hurricane. Her form brighter now, almost solid. The shadow had grown, encompassing nearly half the room, tendrils of darkness reaching for her. Their clash felt ancient, personal, and much bigger than their human stories. "The chair," Eliza called when she saw me. "Quickly!" I fought my way to the rocking chair, now lying on its side. Feeling underneath, my fingers found a small compartment. Inside was a box of salt, a silver knife that looked ceremonial, and a folded paper with instructions in Eleanor's handwriting. The house gave a tremendous shudder, and plaster rained from the ceiling. "What do I do?" I shouted over the cacophony. "The cornerstone!" Eliza pointed to where the north wall met the floor. "It's there!" I scrambled over, using the knife to pry up floorboards until I felt it. A large stone, carved with the same tree symbol from the journal. The foundation stone of Blackwood Estate. Eliza was weakening, her light dimming as the shadow pressed in. "Hurry!" Following Eleanor's instructions, I cut my palm with the knife. Blood freely given, and let it drip onto the stone while reciting words I didn't understand, but somehow knew how to pronounce. The salt formed a circle around me as I worked. The shadow let out a howl of rage, abandoning its assault on Eliza to surge toward me. But it was too late. As my blood touched the stone, a pulse of energy radiated outward like a shockwave. The shadow writhed, its edges disintegrating. I caught a glimpse of a man's face contorted in fury before it collapsed in on itself with a sound like thunder. Then silence, complete and absolute. Eliza stood nearby, her form steadier now, clearer. "You've done it. You've balanced the scales." "Is he gone?" I asked, binding my cut palm with a cloth from the box. "Not gone. Nothing truly leaves this house. But contained, weakened, unable to harm anyone again." Dawn light began filtering through the window, and with it, Eliza's form started to fade. "You don't have to stay," I said. "You can rest now." She smiled, the most genuine expression I'd seen on any Blackwood face. "This house has been my prison and my sanctuary. Now it's your inheritance. Not just the building, but its power. Use it wisely, Alexandra. Will I see you again?" I hadn't realized until that moment how much I wanted to know this grandmother I never had. "I'll be here. Not as you see me now, but in the warm spots on cold days. In the lullabies you'll think are just in your head. The house remembers, Alexandra. And so will I." As the sun crested the horizon, lighting the room in gold, Eliza Blackwood faded from view. But the nursery remained warm, and I could have sworn I heard humming as I made my way downstairs to wait for Olivia. That was 3 years ago. I still live at Blackwood Estate. I've renovated most of it, opened the grounds for community events, turned parts of it into a small bed and breakfast for the braver tourists visiting Vermont. The East Wing remains private, not out of fear but respect. The nursery is restored now, occasionally filled with the laughter of children from the local elementary school when they visit for history lessons. Strange things still happen. Items move, music plays from empty rooms, warm spots appear on the coldest nights. But there's no malice in it anymore. Just the memories of a house that has seen too much. Sometimes, late at night, I sit in the rocking chair and tell Eliza about my day. Sometimes I swear I feel a gentle hand on my shoulder in response. The Blackwood Estate is known locally as the friendly haunted house now. People bring their stories, their theories, their curiosity. The darkness that plagued my family for generations has lifted. But I wonder, what experiences have you had with places that remember? Have you ever felt a presence that meant you no harm, just wanted to be acknowledged? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this telling of my family's history, please subscribe for more tales from Blackwood Estate. I have so many more to share. Just remember, sometimes, when a house calls to you, it might be worth answering. Not all hauntings are horror stories. Some are just family reunions long overdue. Sleep well tonight, and if you hear humming in the darkness, maybe say hello. Story number 2. Have you ever felt like you're being watched? Like those little hairs on the back of your neck stand up for no apparent reason? Or maybe you've noticed something in your home isn't quite where you left it. We all have those moments, but what if I told you those feelings might not just be your imagination? Tonight's story explores the chilling truth behind what some have called America's most disturbing haunted object. A seemingly innocent porcelain doll with a dark secret that's claimed the lives of at least 3 families across the Midwest. If you enjoy this kind of content, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. And let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced anything unexplainable with a doll or other seemingly innocent object. Your story might be featured in an upcoming video. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and prepare yourself for the secret truth behind the murderous haunted doll. The story begins now. I never wanted Grandma Ellie's doll. Even as a kid, there was something about those glass eyes, how they seemed to follow you around the room, the way her painted smile never quite reached them. Her name is Annabelle, Grandma would tell me during summer visits to her farmhouse in rural Nebraska. She's been in our family for generations. I'd nod politely, but always made sure to sleep with my back to the shelf where Annabelle sat watching. Always watching. When the call came that Grandma had passed peacefully in her sleep, I wasn't surprised. At 93, she'd lived a full life. What did surprise me was discovering I'd inherited everything. The weathered 2-story farmhouse, 40 acres of land that hadn't been worked in decades, and yes, Annabelle. The lawyer, a balding man with kind eyes named Mr. Peterson, handed me a sealed envelope along with the will. "Your grandmother insisted this be given to you privately," he said, his voice dropping slightly. Something about family secrets. I thanked him and tucked the envelope into my jacket pocket, deciding to read it later when I was alone. The drive from my apartment in Chicago to the small town of Pinewood, Nebraska would take nearly 9 hours. Plenty of time to think. Plenty of time to remember. The highway stretched endlessly before me as my mind wandered back to childhood summers at the farmhouse. The creak of the porch swing, the smell of Grandma's apple pie cooling on the windowsill, and always, the sensation of being observed from the corner of the room where that damned doll sat. I stopped at a roadside diner somewhere in Iowa. The place was nearly empty, just a trucker at the counter and an elderly couple in a booth by the window. I ordered coffee and pulled out the envelope. The paper inside was yellowed, the handwriting shaky but legible. My dearest Jane, if you're reading this, I've passed on. There are things about our family you need to know. Things about Annabelle. She's more than just a doll, she's a vessel. What she contains has been our family's burden for 4 generations. Whatever you do, don't separate her head from her body. Don't destroy her. The consequences would be unimaginable. There's a journal hidden beneath the floorboards in my bedroom, under the braided rug. It explains everything. I'm sorry to place this burden on you, but there was no one else I could trust. With all my love, Grandma Ellie. I read the letter twice, a chill running down my spine despite the diner's overheated interior. Grandma had always been practical, level-headed, not prone to superstition or melodrama. What could she possibly mean about Annabelle being a vessel? By the time I reached Pinewood, darkness had fallen. The farmhouse loomed against the night sky, windows dark and uninviting. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering courage. The house key felt unnaturally cold in my palm. The front door opened with that familiar creak I remembered from childhood. I fumbled for the light switch, and a dim yellow glow filled the entryway. The house smelled of dust and faint traces of Grandma's lavender perfume. And there, on the entryway table, sat Annabelle. I froze, my heart pounding against my ribs. She hadn't been there in my memories. She always sat on the shelf in Grandma's bedroom. How did she know? I was being ridiculous. Someone, probably Mr. Peterson or one of the neighbors who'd been checking on Grandma, must have moved her. Annabelle stared at me with those glassy blue eyes, her porcelain face frozen in that not-quite-right smile. She wore a blue gingham dress with a white pinafore, her blonde hair arranged in perfect ringlets. From a distance, she looked like any antique doll, valuable but ordinary. But up close you could see the imperfections. The tiny crack running from the corner of her left eye, the slightly asymmetrical smile, the way her head sat just a fraction off-center on her neck. "Hello, Annabelle," I whispered, feeling foolish immediately afterward. I guess we're roommates now. Was it my imagination, or did her smile widen slightly? I shook my head, blaming exhaustion for my overactive imagination. I needed sleep. Dealing with Grandma's belongings and the mysterious journal could wait until morning. I carried my overnight bag upstairs, deliberately avoiding looking at Annabelle as I passed. The guest room was exactly as I remembered it. Faded floral wallpaper, a patchwork quilt on the double bed, and a small writing desk beneath the window overlooking the front yard. As I unpacked my toiletries, a floorboard creaked somewhere in the house. I froze, listening. Nothing. Old houses make noises, I reminded myself aloud. It's normal. But as I crawled into bed and pulled the quilt up to my chin, I couldn't shake the feeling that something in this house was very, very wrong. And it had everything to do with that doll downstairs. Sleep came eventually, but it wasn't restful. I dreamed of a little girl in a blue gingham dress standing at the foot of my bed, her face hidden in shadow. "She's not what you think," the girl whispered. "None of us are." I woke with a start at 3:17 a.m., heart racing, sweat dampening my hairline despite the chilly room. And then I heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound from downstairs. Tap, 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 like small footsteps. or tiny porcelain hands dragging across hardwood floors. Morning light filtered through dusty curtains, chasing away the terrors of the night. In daylight, my fears seemed foolish. The tapping sound had probably been a branch against a window, or perhaps the old furnace coming to life in the basement. I made coffee in Grandma's ancient percolator and steeled myself for the task ahead. Grandma's bedroom, with its four-poster bed and heavy oak furniture, had always intimidated me as a child. Now, as an adult, I felt like an intruder as I pushed open the door. The room smelled faintly of mothballs and Grandma's lavender sachets. Everything was neat, organized. The bed made with hospital corners, not a speck of dust on the dresser. The braided rug lay precisely centered between bed and window. I took a deep breath and knelt down, rolling back the rug to reveal wide pine floorboards, worn smooth by generations of footsteps. One board, slightly darker than the others, seemed to give slightly under my fingers. I pressed harder, and it tilted upward, revealing a small space underneath. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. I carried it downstairs to the kitchen, where sunlight made everything seem less ominous. As I passed through the entryway, I glanced at the table where Annabelle had been sitting the night before. She was gone. My coffee mug slipped from my fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I searched the downstairs frantically, living room, dining room, even the half-bath beneath the stairs. No sign of the doll. With shaking hands, I climbed the stairs again, moving toward Grandma's bedroom, drawn there by some instinct I couldn't name. And there she was, sitting primly on Grandma's rocking chair, hands folded in her lap, those blue glass eyes staring directly at the doorway, as if she'd been waiting for me. "How did you get up here?" I whispered. Silence answered me, but somehow that silence felt amused. I backed out of the room, clutching the journal to my chest like a shield. Back in the kitchen, I swept up the broken mug, mopped the spilled coffee, and made myself a fresh cup, these mundane tasks helping to settle my nerves. Then I opened the journal. The first entry was dated April 18th, 1923, written in spidery handwriting different from Grandma Ellie's. I have done something terrible, something unforgivable. When Edward brought home that beautiful porcelain doll for Ellie's 5th birthday, I thought it a harmless gift. How wrong I was. The dreams began that very night. A woman in white, her face contorted with rage, screaming at me from the foot of my bed. "She's mine now," she would say. "The child is mine." I thought it nothing but nightmares brought on by exhaustion, until Ellie started changing. My sweet, gentle daughter became secretive, temperamental. I found dead animals in the garden, birds, squirrels, once even Mrs. Abernathy's cat. When confronted, Ellie would smile strangely and say, "Annabelle needed them." I paused reading, my hands trembling so badly that coffee sloshed over the rim of my mug. This was written by my great-grandmother, describing my grandmother as a child. The doll, Annabelle, had been in our family for a century. I continued reading, each entry more disturbing than the last. My great-grandmother described increasingly strange behavior from both Ellie and the doll, objects moving on their own, whispered conversations from empty rooms, a mysterious fire in the barn that killed several horses. Then came an entry that made my blood run cold. May 30th, 1923. Edward is dead. They're calling it an accident, a farming accident, they said. But I know. I saw Ellie standing over him in the field, that doll clutched in her arms, watching as the tractor rolled. She didn't call for help. She didn't scream. She just watched, with the same empty smile that cursed doll wears. When I confronted her, she looked at me with eyes that weren't hers, cold, ancient eyes, and said, "Mama, Annabelle says you're next if you don't behave. I've consulted with Widow Jenkins, who knows of such things." The doll is possessed, she says, not by a demon as I feared, but by something perhaps worse. A human soul twisted by rage and jealousy, the soul of Catherine Blackwood. The journal continued, describing how my great-grandmother had researched this Catherine Blackwood, a local woman who had lost her child in 1897 and subsequently died by suicide. Before her death, she had created a porcelain doll that looked exactly like her daughter, and somehow, through means the journal called dark arts, she had bound her soul to it. Widow Jenkins had apparently helped my great-grandmother perform a ritual to trap Catherine's soul more securely in the doll, preventing her from possessing young Ellie further, but not removing her entirely. The final entry explained why they hadn't simply destroyed the doll. To destroy the vessel without proper banishment would release Catherine's spirit entirely, free to possess anyone she chooses. The binding ritual keeps her contained, but it must be renewed every 30 years. I have taught Ellie what she must do when the time comes. The burden now passes to her, and someday to her descendants. May God forgive me for what I've done, for the burden I've placed on future generations. I closed the journal, mind reeling. According to these dates, the binding ritual would need to be performed again, this year. Is that why Grandma had left me the house, the doll, the journal? Was I supposed to continue this macabre family tradition? A soft creak drew my attention to the doorway. Annabelle sat just outside the kitchen, her head tilted at an impossible angle, those glass eyes fixed on me. I screamed, dropping the journal and backing against the counter. "This isn't real," I whispered. "You're not real." The doll's head straightened slowly, the movement mechanical and wrong. Her painted smile seemed to widen. "Catherine," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Your name is Catherine Blackwood." The temperature in the kitchen plummeted. My breath fogged in front of my face. The lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. "I know what you are," I continued, drawing strength from knowledge. "And I know what I have to do." The journal had fallen open to a page I hadn't read, a page detailing the binding ritual. It required specific herbs, candles, and blood. My blood. The blood of the doll's keeper. I glanced at the clock on the microwave. 3:17 p.m. Exactly 12 hours since I'd woken from my nightmare. I had until midnight to prepare the ritual, or face whatever consequences came from a century-old binding spell unraveling. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Perfect. I needed supplies for the ritual, specific herbs and candles that I doubted the local convenience store would carry. The journal mentioned Widow Jenkins. I wondered if any of her descendants still lived in Pinewood. Before leaving the house, I did something that felt both foolish and necessary. I placed Annabelle in a cardboard box, secured the lid with packing tape, and locked the box in the trunk of my car. I wasn't about to leave her alone in the house, nor was I comfortable having her in the passenger seat beside me. Main Street in Pinewood hadn't changed much since my childhood visits. The same brick buildings housed the same small businesses, the hardware store, the diner, the post office. New was a small shop with crystals and dream catchers displayed in the window. Enlightened Path Metaphysical Supplies. A bell tinkled as I entered. The shop smelled of incense and dried herbs. Behind the counter stood a woman, perhaps my age, early 30s, with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes. "Welcome to Enlightened Path," she said. "I'm Meredith. Can I help you find something?" I hesitated, then decided on honesty. This might sound strange, but did you have an ancestor named Jenkins? A woman who might have been known for folk remedies? Spiritual practices? Meredith's eyebrows shot up. "You're asking about my great-great-grandmother, Constance Jenkins. Most people around here called her Widow Jenkins." She studied me more carefully. You're Ellie Harmon's granddaughter, aren't you? Jane? I nodded, surprised. I've been expecting you, Meredith said, her voice lowering. Your grandmother came to see me a month ago. She said you might need my help with a family heirloom. Relief washed over me. You know about Annabelle. Meredith glanced around the empty shop, then flipped the sign on the door to closed and locked it. My family has been helping yours contain Catherine Blackwood for 4 generations, she said. When your grandmother told me she was leaving everything to you, I worried. The binding ritual must be performed tomorrow night, the 100th anniversary of Catherine's binding to the doll. Tomorrow, I said, panic rising. The journal said every 30 years. The cycle is shortening, Meredith explained. The last ritual was performed 20 years ago. Before that, 25. Catherine's power is growing. She's fighting the binding. Thunder rumbled outside, though the storm was still miles away. I have most of what you'll need, Meredith continued, gathering items from various shelves. Bundles of herbs, black candles, a small silver bowl. But the ritual requires more than just physical components. It requires someone with a connection to Catherine, someone she's trying to influence. Me? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Meredith nodded gravely. Has she started appearing in your dreams yet, a woman in white? Cold dread settled in my stomach. No, but I dreamed of a little girl. She said, she's not what you think, none of us are. Meredith froze, nearly dropping the candles she held. That's new, she whispered. That's never happened before. What does it mean? I don't know, but I think we should talk to someone who might. My grandfather. He performed the ritual with your grandmother 45 years ago. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a comfortable living room in a small house on the outskirts of town. Joseph Jenkins was 92, his body frail but his mind still sharp. His gnarled hands trembled slightly as he accepted the cup of tea Meredith offered him. So, Catherine's up to her old tricks, he said after I'd explained everything, trying to break free before the binding renewal. But what about the little girl in my dream? I asked. Who is she? Joseph's rheumy eyes fixed on me. Could be Catherine's daughter, the one she lost, the one she made the doll to look like. He sipped his tea thoughtfully. Or could be something else entirely. What do you mean? There's something your grandmother and I discovered during the last ritual, he said, voice dropping to a near whisper. Something we kept out of the journal because we feared what might happen if Catherine realized we knew. The old man leaned forward. Catherine Blackwood isn't alone in that doll. A chill ran through me. What? When a soul has been bound that long, in that much rage and despair, it can fragment, split. The ritual doesn't just bind Catherine, it binds the fragments back together, prevents them from escaping individually. Are you saying there are multiple entities in Annabelle? Joseph nodded slowly. At least 2, Catherine, and something that might once have been her daughter, Emily. But after a century trapped with her mother's rage, I'm not sure what's left of the child she once was. Lightning flashed outside, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. The storm had arrived. We need to get back to the house, Meredith said urgently. If the binding is already weakening, the storm will only strengthen Catherine's ability to influence the physical world. My phone rang. An unknown local number. I answered hesitantly. Miss Harmon? A male voice, vaguely familiar. This is Deputy Wilson with the Pinewood Sheriff's Department. There's been a break-in at your grandmother's property. Nothing seems to be stolen, but, well, there's some damage you should see. My eyes met Meredith's worried gaze. I'll be right there, I told the deputy. As we drove back toward the farmhouse, the storm intensified. Rain lashing the windshield, wind bending trees along the roadside. I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was following us. Or, more accurately, following whatever was locked in the trunk of my car. 2 patrol cars were parked in front of the farmhouse, lights flashing. Deputy Wilson, the balding man with kind eyes I now recognized as the lawyer, Mr. Peterson, met us at the porch steps. "Miss Harmon, I didn't realize you had the doll with you," he said, eyeing the box tucked under my arm. I'd decided I wasn't letting Annabelle out of my sight. "What happened here?" I asked, ignoring his comment about the doll. The deputy led us inside. The damage was concentrated in Grandma's bedroom. The floor had been torn up, the braided rug shredded. Across the bedroom wall, gouged deeply into the plaster, were 3 words: "Release me now." "We thought it might be local kids," Deputy Wilson said, though his tone suggested he believed otherwise. "But there's no sign of forced entry and—" "Well, what?" I prompted. "The damage to the floor and walls. Our forensic technician says it would take significant strength. Industrial tools, maybe, but there's no evidence of tools being used. It's like someone tore into the plaster with their bare hands." I clutched the box tighter. "Thank you, Deputy. I'll handle it from here." He seemed relieved to leave, though he promised to send a patrol car by throughout the night. Once he was gone, Meredith examined the gouged words, careful not to touch them. "Catherine's getting desperate," she said. "The binding must be weakening faster than we thought." "Can we perform the ritual tonight?" I asked. "Or do we have to wait until tomorrow? The ritual is strongest on the anniversary, but—" She glanced at the wall, then at the box containing Annabelle. "I think we should start the preparations now. If the binding fails completely before we can renew it—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, we began preparing for a ritual to bind a century-old, vengeful spirit to a porcelain doll. And I wondered what exactly I had inherited from Grandma Ellie besides an old farmhouse and family secrets. Night fell early, hastened by the storm clouds that hung low and menacing over the farmhouse. Meredith had arranged the ritual components in the living room. Black candles forming a circle, herbs burning in the silver bowl, an intricate symbol drawn in chalk on the hardwood floor. "Where's Annabelle?" she asked, looking up from her preparations. My stomach dropped. The box I'd placed on the kitchen counter less than an hour ago, was empty, the packing tape neatly sliced open. "She's gone," I whispered. A child's laugh, high and sweet but somehow wrong, echoed from upstairs. Meredith's face drained of color. "The binding is breaking. We need to find her, now." We searched the house room by room, jumping at every creak and shadow. The storm had knocked out the power, leaving us dependent on flashlights that seemed to grow dimmer by the minute. "Jane?" Meredith grabbed my arm as we approached Grandma's bedroom. "If we find her, if she's already breaking free, don't look into her eyes. Catherine can influence anyone, but direct eye contact makes possession easier." I nodded, throat too dry for words. The bedroom door was closed. It hadn't been when we left to search the rest of the house. Meredith reached for the knob, then hesitated. "Let me," she whispered. "My family has some resistance to her influence. Years of exposure during the rituals." The door swung open before she could touch it. Annabelle sat primly on the bed, her porcelain hands folded in her lap. But something was different. Her head, which had always tilted slightly to the right, now sat perfectly straight. Her painted smile seemed wider, her glass eyes more alive. "Hello, Jane," said a voice, not from the doll, but from somewhere behind us. We whirled around. A woman stood in the hallway, translucent, her features indistinct except for eyes burning with hatred. She wore a white dress, old-fashioned, stained with what looked like dirt or blood. "Catherine?" Meredith breathed. The figure flickered like a bad television signal. "The Jenkins woman," she hissed, "always interfering, always helping to keep me prisoner." "You can't be free yet," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "The binding is weakening," Catherine finished, her voice taking on an edge of triumph. 100 years is a long imprisonment, Jane. I've learned many things, grown stronger, made allies. "Allies?" Meredith whispered. As if in answer, the doll on the bed moved, head turning, arms unfolding. She stood, her movements jerky but purposeful, and smiled a smile no painted porcelain could achieve. "Hello, Mother," the doll said, in a child's voice that made my skin crawl. Catherine's ghostly form seemed to solidify slightly. "My Emily has been such a good daughter," she said, waiting, watching, learning the ritual that keeps us bound so that one day we could break it. "Emily died over a century ago," I said. "Whatever's in that doll with you isn't your daughter anymore." Catherine's form flickered violently, rage distorting her features. "Liar!" The word hit like a physical force, sending Meredith staggering backward. The doll, Emily, giggled, the sound like breaking glass. "Mama doesn't like liars," she said. "Mama hurt the last liar. Your grandmother. She tried to separate us." "Grandma Ellie?" I gasped. You killed her?" "Heart failure, the doctor called it," Catherine said, advancing slowly. He couldn't see the fear in her eyes when Emily climbed onto her bed that night. Couldn't hear her begging as her heart gave out. Grief and rage surged through me. "You murderess!" "Jane, don't," Meredith warned, pulling me back. "We need to get to the ritual circle. It's our only chance." We backed away slowly, keeping our eyes on both the ghostly woman and the animate doll. Catherine seemed constrained to the upstairs hallway, flickering violently whenever she tried to move beyond certain points. The binding wasn't completely broken yet, but the doll was under no such constraints. Emily hopped down from the bed and followed us, her porcelain feet making that familiar tapping sound on the hardwood floor. Tap, tap, tap. We backed down the stairs, stumbling in our haste. The ritual circle waited in the living room, our only hope of containing Catherine and whatever remained of Emily before they fully broke free. Lightning struck nearby, illuminating the living room in stark white light. In that flash, I saw Emily was no longer behind us. She had somehow moved ahead, standing at the edge of the chalk circle. "No!" Meredith cried, lunging forward to stop the doll from disturbing the ritual components. Too late. With one sweep of her tiny porcelain arm, Emily sent the black candles scattering across the floor. "You've lost," Catherine's voice echoed from upstairs, growing stronger. "The binding ends tonight." I watched in horror as the chalk lines of the ritual circle began to fade, as if being erased by invisible hands. The herbs in the silver bowl ignited, flames leaping unnaturally high. Meredith grabbed my arm. "The journal," she said urgently. "There must be something, some contingency. The journal. I'd left it in the kitchen after our return." I sprinted there, Emily's laughter following me like a physical presence. The journal lay open on the counter, pages turning by themselves in the wind from the open window. A window I was certain we'd closed. I lunged for it, catching glimpses of entries I hadn't read before. And there it was, in Grandma Ellie's handwriting, dated just 2 months ago. "If the binding fails completely, there is one last resort. The vessel must be broken at the weakest point, where head meets body, while speaking the words of separation. This will not destroy Catherine, but will temporarily disorient her spirit, creating time to escape. Beware. Emily must be addressed separately. She is not what Catherine believes." The words of separation were written below, Latin phrases I could barely pronounce. A child's voice spoke directly behind me. "What are you reading, Jane?" I whirled around. Emily stood in the doorway, her porcelain head tilted questioningly. Behind her, a wispy form was taking shape. Catherine, growing stronger by the minute, extending her influence downstairs. I clutched the journal to my chest. "Emily," I said, remembering my dream. "She's not what you think. None of us are. You don't have to help her." The doll's head tilted further, an impossible angle for porcelain joints. "Mother keeps me safe." "She keeps you prisoner," I countered, an idea forming. "Just like she's been imprisoned. You're not her daughter, are you? Not really." The doll went very still. "Your mother died in 1897, I continued, circling slowly, trying to position myself between Emily and the doorway. "Whatever you are, you're something else. Something that got caught in Catherine's binding spell." "Lies!" Catherine's voice shook the house, dishes rattling in cabinets. Her form appeared more solid now as she floated behind Emily. But the doll hadn't moved, hadn't responded to her mother's rage. "Emily," I said softly, "if you help me renew the binding, I can modify it. I can set you free while keeping Catherine contained." The doll's head straightened. "Promise?" The voice was different now, younger, uncertain. "I promise," I said. Catherine screamed, a sound of pure fury that shattered the kitchen windows. Glass rained down around us as she lunged forward, her ghostly hands reaching for my throat. Emily moved with shocking speed, placing herself between us. "No, Mother," she cried. "Not her." Catherine recoiled as if struck. "Emily, what are you doing?" "Choosing," the doll said simply. What happened next occurred in a blur of motion and light. Catherine's spirit seemed to collapse inward, then expand violently, engulfing the room in frigid air. The doll, Emily, was thrown against the wall with devastating force, her porcelain head cracking on impact. "No!" I screamed, diving forward. As my hands closed around the doll, I felt something surge through me. Cold, ancient, but not malevolent. Words formed in my mind, words I somehow knew were the true binding spell, not the version written in the journal. I spoke them aloud, my voice somehow harmonizing with another, Meredith's, though she stood in the doorway, her lips not moving. Catherine's spirit writhed and twisted, her screams becoming more desperate as an unseen force seemed to pull her toward the damaged doll in my hands. "The vessel," Meredith gasped. "Complete the binding." With shaking hands, I pressed Emily's cracked head back to her body, not separating them as Grandma's journal had instructed, but reuniting them. As the final words of the spell left my lips, a blinding light erupted from the doll. Then silence, complete and absolute. The storm outside had stopped. The house was still. In my hands, Annabelle looked as she always had, a slightly creepy antique doll with glass eyes and a painted smile, though now with a thin crack running across her neck. "Is it over?" I whispered. Meredith approached cautiously, her fingers gently touching the doll's cracked surface. "The binding is complete," she confirmed. "Stronger than before. Catherine is contained. And Emily?" A sad smile touched Meredith's lips. "Emily was never real, not in the way Catherine believed. When she bound her spirit to the doll, she created a fragment, a piece of herself that took on the identity of her lost daughter. So I just helped imprison an innocent—" "No," Meredith interrupted firmly. "What you felt at the end, what helped you complete the true binding, that was Emily choosing to rejoin Catherine, to make her whole again. It was an act of redemption, maybe." I looked down at the doll. Just a doll now. "What happens to Annabelle now?" "She stays with you," Meredith said. "The binding is renewed for another cycle. But this time, I think it might be different. You recognized the truth that generations of your family and mine missed. Catherine wasn't just evil, she was broken. In binding her properly, you may have begun healing her." I wasn't entirely convinced, but as I carefully placed Annabelle on the shelf in what was now my living room, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not fear, but responsibility. And perhaps a tiny measure of hope. That night, I dreamed again of the little girl in the blue gingham dress. But this time, her face wasn't hidden in shadow. She smiled, a real smile, not the painted grimace of the doll, and took my hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing us, both of us." When I woke the next morning, I could have sworn Annabelle's painted smile seemed just a little less sinister, her glass eyes a little less cold. As for what happens when the next binding cycle approaches, well, that's a story for another night. If you enjoyed the secret truth behind the murderous haunted doll, make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss an upload. I'd love to hear your theories in the comments. Was Catherine truly evil, or just a grieving mother driven to desperate acts? And what would you do if you discovered a family heirloom with a dark secret? Also, let me know if you've ever felt like an inanimate object in your home was watching you. Sometimes those feelings aren't just your story number 3. Ever had that feeling that someone's watching you? Not someone outside your window or lurking in the shadows, but someone inside your own mind. That quiet voice that whispers things you don't want to hear. We all have thoughts we'd rather silence. But what if those thoughts started taking control? This story might sound familiar to some of you, maybe too familiar. If you've ever felt trapped by your own mind, you'll understand exactly what our protagonist experiences. And if you haven't, well, maybe this will give you a glimpse into what that kind of mental prison feels like. So get comfortable, turn down the lights, and prepare to drift off to a story that might just follow you into your dreams. And if you find yourself connecting with this tale a little too deeply, leave a comment below. I'd love to know I'm not the only one who's been there. The story begins now. I've always been a light sleeper. The faintest sound, a car door closing down the street, the hum of the refrigerator cycling on, and I'm wide awake, staring at the ceiling, counting the minutes until my alarm goes off. But lately, it's not the external noises keeping me up, it's the noise inside my head. My name is Alex Wheeler. I live in a small craftsman in Portland, Oregon that I purchased last fall. A charming little place with hardwood floors, a breakfast nook that catches the morning sun just right, and walls that I'm starting to think might be a bit too thin, both for the outside world and for what's trying to get out from within. You left the stove on. That's how it always starts, a simple thought. Nothing extraordinary. We all have these little anxieties, right? I sit up in bed knowing perfectly well that I turned off the stove after making dinner. But what if I didn't? You left the stove on and your house is going to burn down while you sleep. I sigh, throwing off the covers and padding barefoot across the cold floor. 3 in the morning. The hardwoods creak beneath my feet as I make my way to the kitchen, illuminated only by the dim glow of the microwave clock. I check the stove, all burners off, of course, just like they were the last 4 times I checked tonight. But did you check the oven? I open the oven door, empty and cold. What about the coffee maker? Did you unplug it? The coffee maker sits unplugged on the counter just as I left it. The iron? You ironed your shirt for tomorrow's meeting. I didn't iron anything today. Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure? I close my eyes, taking a deep breath. I am sure. I know I'm sure. But there's that voice. That persistent, nagging voice that won't let me be certain of anything. I trudge back to bed, my shoulders heavy with exhaustion. Tomorrow, technically today, is an important day. A presentation to potential investors for my small graphic design business. I need sleep. I need to be sharp. You're going to mess it up. No, I'm not. I've prepared for weeks. You'll stutter. You'll forget key points. They'll see right through you. I pull the pillow over my head, as if I could physically block out thoughts coming from inside my own mind. Remember that time in 7th grade when you had to give that oral report and you got so nervous you threw up in front of everyone? Of course I remember. How could I forget? 20 years later, and the memory still makes my stomach clench. It'll be just like that tomorrow, only worse, because these are adults, professionals, with money you need. Shut up, I whisper to the empty room, to myself. Just shut up and let me sleep. But the voice doesn't shut up. It never does. It shifts and morphs, finding new anxieties to exploit, new fears to amplify. By the time my alarm goes off at 6:30, I've had maybe an hour of actual sleep. My eyes burn as I shuffle to the bathroom, avoiding my reflection in the mirror. The shower helps a little, hot water cascading over tense muscles, steam filling my lungs. For a moment, the voice recedes. Coffee next, strong and black. The bitter taste grounds me in reality. I can do this. I've managed before. I'll manage today. As I drive to the meeting, windshield wipers keeping time with the alternative rock playing softly on the radio, I rehearse my presentation in my head. The voice interjects occasionally, pointing out all the ways I might fail. That SUV is following awfully close. What if they rear-end you? Your laptop with the presentation is in the back seat. It could get damaged. I change lanes, putting distance between me and the SUV. What if... Enough! I shout, slamming my palm against the dashboard. The sound of my own voice startles me, but it silences the voice. For now. Miraculously, the presentation goes smoothly. My voice doesn't shake. I don't stutter. I answer questions articulately. By the end, there are nods of approval, handshakes, promises to be in touch soon. As I pack up my laptop, a small, victorious smile plays at my lips. See? Nothing to worry about. They're just being polite. They hated it. They're probably laughing about you right now. The smile falters, but I hold on to the moment of success. This is a win. By 6 o'clock, I'm drained. Mentally, physically, emotionally. I stop at the grocery store on the way home, mindlessly filling my cart. As I reach for a box of cereal, a wave of dizziness washes over me. The fluorescent lights suddenly seem too bright, the music playing overhead too loud. The aisle stretches and warps before my eyes. You're losing it. Right here in the cereal aisle of Safeway, how pathetic. I close my eyes, gripping the handle of the shopping cart until the feeling passes. Just exhaustion. Just stress, nothing more. The cashier, a college-aged girl with purple hair, looks at me with concern. You okay, sir? You look a little pale. I nod, fumbling for my wallet. Fine, just long day. Home at last. I unpack the groceries, prepare a simple dinner, eat half of it before pushing the plate away. The house feels too quiet, too empty, yet simultaneously too full of the noise in my head. I turn on the TV for background noise. Eventually, exhaustion wins out over anxiety, and I find myself nodding off on the couch. Just as I'm drifting off, a notification from my phone jolts me back to consciousness. A text message from the potential investors. Contract being drafted. Expect paperwork tomorrow. Congratulations. Relief floods through me. They liked my presentation. All that worry for nothing. Or maybe they're settling. Maybe you were their last choice. The relief dims but doesn't disappear entirely. This is good news. This is what I've been working toward. As I crawl into bed, I make a promise to myself. I'll call Dr. Bennett tomorrow. It's been 6 months since our last session. Too long. I need help managing this again before it gets worse. It's already worse, and what are they going to do? Put you on more medications that make you feel like a zombie? You're broken, Alex. Fundamentally broken. I squeeze my eyes shut. I'm not broken, I whisper into the darkness. I'm just tired. But as the hours tick by and sleep remains elusive, the voice grows louder, more insistent, more separate from myself somehow. As if it's not just intrusive thoughts anymore, but something with its own agenda. And that's when the really terrifying thought creeps in. What if this isn't anxiety anymore? What if it's something else entirely? What if I'm not alone in my own head? Morning comes with a disorienting sense that I never actually fell asleep. I call Dr. Bennett's office, half hoping to get voicemail. Instead, a receptionist answers, cheerful and efficient. Dr. Bennett has had a cancellation this afternoon at 2:30. Would that work for you, Mr. Wheeler? I agree quickly before I can talk myself out of it. 2:30. I need to make that work. The morning passes in a blur. By lunchtime, I've received the contract from the investors. Actual, tangible proof that yesterday's presentation was a success. I should feel elated. Instead, I feel strangely detached. My assistant Danielle gives me a concerned look. You okay, Alex? You've seemed a bit distracted lately. For a moment, I consider telling her the truth, that I'm barely sleeping, that I can't quiet the negative thoughts, that I'm starting to wonder if I'm losing my grip on reality. She'll think you're crazy. She'll tell everyone. Your clients will find out. I'm fine, I lie, forcing a smile. Just a little tired. Big presentation yesterday, you know. Danielle doesn't look convinced, but nods anyway. Well, I cleared your schedule for your appointment with Dr. Bennett at 2:30. I didn't put it on my calendar. I just made the appointment this morning. Danielle must see the confusion on my face because she adds, You added it about an hour ago? Dr. Bennett at 2:30. Right, I say slowly. Of course. Thanks, Danielle. After she leaves, I check my digital calendar. There it is. Appointment with Dr. Bennett, 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. I have no memory of adding it. None whatsoever. You're losing time now. That's not good, Alex. Not good at all. A chill runs down my spine. Losing time is a whole different level of concerning. Dr. Bennett's office is in an old Victorian house on a tree-lined street. The waiting room hasn't changed. Same comfortable chairs, same soothing blue walls. Dr. Bennett appears, in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. Alex, it's been a while. Come on in. So, she says once we're seated, what brings you back after 6 months? I take a deep breath. I'm not sleeping. The anxious thoughts, they're getting out of control. I can't shut them off long enough to sleep, which makes everything worse. I trail off, suddenly unsure how to explain without sounding completely unhinged. Are you having panic attacks again? She asks gently. I shake my head. Not exactly. It's more like the voice in my head won't stop criticizing me. And lately, it feels less like my own thoughts and more like... I hesitate. More like what, Alex? More like something separate from me. The words come out in a rush, like there's someone else in my head. I expect her to look alarmed. Instead, she nods thoughtfully. That's actually not an uncommon experience for people with severe anxiety, especially when combined with sleep deprivation. Our internal critic can start to feel like a separate entity. She asks about potential triggers, and I mention unpacking the last of my grandmother's things 2 weeks ago, around when the voice started feeling more separate. Alex, grief can manifest in unusual ways, especially unprocessed grief. And objects connected to loved ones can trigger emotional responses we're not consciously aware of. It makes sense in a clinical, rational way, but it doesn't explain the growing sense of otherness to the voice, the feeling that it has intention separate from my own. We discuss practical strategies, medication adjustments, sleep hygiene, mindfulness techniques. By the end, I have a new prescription for a sleep aid and a follow-up appointment for next week. That night, I take the medication and fall into the deepest sleep I've had in weeks. I dream of my grandmother's house, a lakeside cottage where I spent summers as a child. In the dream, my grandmother sits at her desk, writing in a leather-bound journal. When I look over her shoulder, I see pages filled with spiraling patterns that seem to move as I look at them. Grandma? I try, reaching for her shoulder. When she turns, it's not my grandmother's face, but a blank, featureless expanse of skin. I stumble backward in horror, falling into darkness. I wake with a gasp. The digital clock reads 3:17 a.m. I've slept for nearly 7 hours, a miracle by recent standards, but the dream has left me disoriented. Reaching for water, I freeze. There, on my nightstand, is a leather-bound journal identical to the one from my dream. A journal I don't recognize, have never seen before. "Open it," whispers the voice, suddenly intimate, as if spoken directly into my ear. "See what I've been writing while you sleep." My hand hovers over the journal, trembling slightly. This can't be real. It has to be a hallucination from the medication. "Open it," the voice insists, no longer in my head, but seemingly in the room. "Don't you want to know what I've been doing while you're not watching?" I snatch my hand back. This isn't real. It can't be real. I squeeze my eyes shut, count to 10, and open them again. The journal is still there. With a sudden burst of desperate energy, I lunge for the lamp. The warm glow illuminates my bedroom. Familiar walls, familiar furniture, including the unfamiliar journal, bound in dark brown leather, worn at the corners as if well used. No title, no name embossed on the cover. "It was Grandma's," the voice offers helpfully. "You put it in the window seat with her other things. I just borrowed it for a while." "No," I say aloud, my voice sounding strange in the quiet room. "This isn't happening." With shaking hands, I untie the closure and open to the first page. It's blank. I flip through, page after page of unmarked paper. Relief washes over me, followed by confusion. "Keep going," the voice urges, "all the way to the end." Against my better judgment, I continue turning pages until I reach the final one. And there, in handwriting that is unmistakably my own, yet with a quality I don't recognize, more angular, more deliberate, is a single sentence. "I've been here all along." I slam the journal shut, heart racing. This can't be happening. I don't remember writing that. I don't remember ever seeing this journal before tonight. "But you did write it," the voice says, almost gently. "Just not consciously." "Who are you?" I whisper, clutching the journal tightly. "What are you?" "I told you. I've been here all along. Ever since you were a child, hiding in that dusty corner of your mind where you stuff all the things you don't want to face." I shake my head, denying it even as a terrible suspicion begins to form. "No, you're just anxiety, just intrusive thoughts." "Dr. Bennett doesn't know what we know," the voice interrupts. "She doesn't know about the things you've forgotten, the things you made yourself forget." Another fragment of memory. My grandmother sitting beside my bed, holding my hand, murmuring words I couldn't understand. The smell of herbs burning in a small clay dish. "Your grandmother knew better," the voice says. "She knew what had happened. She tried to help you." "Stop it," I say, throwing the journal across the room. "You're not real. This is just sleep deprivation." "Then go back to sleep," the voice challenges. "If I'm not real, if this is just your exhausted mind playing tricks, then go back to sleep." But I can't. Despite the medication, I'm now completely, painfully awake. As I wait for the kettle to boil, I glance at the kitchen window and freeze. There, reflected in the glass, is my face. But the expression isn't mine. A slight smile I'm not forming. Eyes that look amused when I feel only terror. I whirl around, half expecting to see someone standing behind me, but the kitchen is empty. When I look back at the window, the reflection is normal again. My own pale, frightened face. "You can't keep ignoring me forever, Alex," the voice says, softer now but more insistent. "We need to talk about what happened. What really happened." "Nothing happened," I insist, gripping the counter for support. "I'm just having a mental health episode." "Remember the summer you turned 12? The voice asks conversationally. "The last summer at Grandma's cottage?" Despite myself, memories surface. Fragmented images from a childhood I've largely packed away. The long drive to Michigan, the relief of arriving at the cottage, running to the lake while the adults unpacked. "The cottage was your safe place," the voice continues, almost wistful, until it wasn't. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. You've just buried it so deep you think you've forgotten. But I remember, I was there. Dawn is breaking now, pale light seeping through the curtains. I've been sitting in the living room for hours, having this impossible conversation with a voice in my head that claims to be something other. It sounds insane. It probably is insane. The rational explanation is that I'm having some kind of psychotic break, except for the journal. The journal that somehow appeared on my nightstand that contains a message in my handwriting that I have no memory of writing. What do I do? I ask finally, exhaustion making my voice crack. What do you want me to do? First, the voice says, stop fighting me so hard. Second, go back to the window seat. There's something else there you need to see. What? Your grandmother's other journal, the one she kept after you let me in. The one where she wrote down what she learned about me, about us. On legs that feel disconnected from my body, I rise and make my way to the guest bedroom. The morning light gives the room a deceptive normalcy, just an ordinary spare room with a twin bed, a small desk, and a window seat. The window seat where I stored my grandmother's things. With trembling hands, I lift the cushioned lid. Inside are the boxes I placed there 2 weeks ago. Old photo albums, a few books, small keepsakes. Nothing that explains what's happening. Look deeper, the voice urges. There's a false bottom, left corner. I reach in, feeling along the edges until my fingers catch on something, a slight gap. I press, and a small section of the bottom lifts, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. And there, nestled in the secret space, is another journal, identical to the one I found on my nightstand but newer looking, the leather less worn. Take it, the voice says, and for once, I don't feel the need to resist. Whatever is happening, psychotic break or supernatural invasion, the answers seem to lie within these pages. I lift the journal from its hiding place, settle back on the window seat, and open to the first page. My dearest Alex, it begins in my grandmother's familiar handwriting. If you're reading this, then I've failed to protect you, and for that, I am more sorry than I can express. What happened that summer was my fault. I should have been more careful with the journal, with the knowledge it contained. I read on, heart pounding, as my grandmother explains exactly what happened 20 years ago. The journal, with the spiraling patterns, a family heirloom passed down through generations of women with a particular sensitivity to the thin places, the entity that had slipped through when I, an untrained child, had unwittingly opened a doorway. I thought I had succeeded, she writes toward the end. You seemed better, but then I realized it hadn't left. It had simply gone deeper, hidden itself so well that even I couldn't sense it anymore. And now it waits, growing stronger as you grow, feeding on your fears. The final page contains instructions, detailed, specific instructions for a ritual that, my grandmother claims, will bind the entity and eventually expel it. It won't be easy, she warns. It will fight. It will use every fear, every doubt against you, but you are stronger than it knows. You just need to believe it. I close the journal, a strange calm settling over me. Whatever is happening, delusion or supernatural reality, I now have a path forward. You don't really believe all that, do you? The voice asks, sounding nervous for the first time. Ancient rituals and binding spells? In the 21st century, this is clearly the journal of a woman suffering from dementia. But I can hear the fear beneath the mockery. The voice, the entity, doesn't want me to try my grandmother's ritual. I'll make you a better offer, the voice says quickly. Real cooperation, equal time. You said that before, I interrupt, a new strength in my voice. But I think you were lying. I think you want everything, my life, my body, me, gone completely. That's not, it is, I say firmly, and I'm not going to let that happen. By nightfall, I've gathered everything needed for the ritual. Sage, lavender, and rosemary. Salt, a small silver bowl inherited from my grandmother, candles in specific colors. I've cleared a space in the center of my living room, moving furniture against the walls to create an empty circle. The voice has been suspiciously quiet all day, offering only occasional sarcastic comments. But beneath the mockery, I sense fear. Good. Let it be afraid for once instead of me. As I arrange the candles according to my grandmother's instructions, white to the north, blue to the east, red to the south, black to the west, the voice makes one final attempt. "This is insane," it says, with forced casualness. Even if everything in that journal is true, which it isn't, this ritual was designed by an old woman with no scientific understanding. You could harm yourself. Worse harm than what you're doing to me? I ask, continuing my preparations. The insomnia, the anxiety, taking control of my body. "I've never hurt you," the voice protests. "I've been trying to help you, keeping you vigilant, cautious." I laugh, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "Is that what you call it? Telling me I'm going to fail at everything, making me check the stove 5 times a night?" "Self-preservation instincts," the voice argues. "The world is dangerous." "No," I say firmly. "You've been feeding on my fear, growing stronger while I grow weaker. That ends tonight." At precisely 11:45, I light the candles in the order specified and the small bundle of herbs in the silver bowl. The scent fills the room, sharp and sweet simultaneously. I begin to recite the words from the journal, ancient sounds that feel strange on my tongue yet somehow familiar, as if part of me remembers them from somewhere deep. Almost immediately I feel resistance, a heaviness in my chest, a tightness in my throat, as if my body is fighting against the words. "Stop this," the voice hisses. "You don't know what you're doing." I push through the resistance, forcing each syllable past the constriction. With my right hand I begin to trace the first symbol in the air, a complex pattern that seems to hang in the space, glowing faintly though there is nothing there to glow. "I won't let you do this," the voice snarls, and suddenly my right hand seizes up, fingers contorting painfully. I switch to my left hand without missing a beat. I'm sweating now, my body trembling with the effort. The room darkens despite the candles, shadows gathering in the corners, stretching across the floor toward me. The air grows cold, my breath visible in small puffs. "You can't win this," the voice says, somehow louder now. "I'm too much a part of you." I complete the first symbol and begin the second. The pressure increases, pain building behind my eyes, threatening to split my skull. "Stop," the voice pleads, changing tactics. "You're hurting us. This is killing us." I ignore it, completing the second symbol and beginning the third. The room begins to spin, reality warping. The shadows on the walls take on shapes, writhing, reaching forms trying to grab me. This isn't real, I tell myself. It's trying to frighten me into stopping. I complete the third symbol and begin the fourth, the final one. The pressure in my head reaches a crescendo, my vision blurring. "Please," the voice begs, suddenly small and frightened. "If you do this, part of you dies too, the part of you that I've become." For a moment I hesitate. What if, after 20 years, the entity has become so integrated with my consciousness that removing it will fundamentally change who I am? But then I think of the life I've been living, the constant fear, the sleepless nights, the feeling of being at war with my own mind. With renewed determination, I complete the final symbol just as the clock strikes midnight. The room freezes around me, time suspended, and then I feel it. A tearing sensation inside my mind, as if something is being ripped away from my consciousness. I scream, the sound echoing in my living room. The voice screams too, a sound of primal fear and rage. The shadows contort, stretching toward the ceiling, forming a spiraling vortex above my head. "You can't do this!" The voice gasps, fading. "I am you? No," I say through gritted teeth. "You were never me, just a parasite feeding on my fears." With a sound like glass shattering inside my skull, I feel something break free. A presence that's been with me so long I had forgotten what it felt like to be truly alone in my own mind. The shadow vortex pulses once, twice, then collapses in on itself, disappearing with a final whispered howl. And then, silence. Complete and absolute silence, both in the room and in my head. I collapse backward onto the floor, gasping for breath, tears streaming down my face. The candles still burn at the 4 points of the compass. The herbs in the silver bowl have burned to ash. Slowly, I take inventory of my body, my mind. The pain is receding, leaving behind a curious lightness, as if some weight I've carried for so long I'd forgotten it was there has finally been lifted. And my thoughts are quiet. Not empty, but uncrowded. No critical commentary, no doom-laden predictions. Just my own voice, my own consciousness, alone in my own head for perhaps the first time in 20 years. As the first light of morning seeps through the windows, I finally gather the courage to rise. My body aches from hours on the hardwood floor, but the ache is clean, physical, normal. In the shower, I let hot water wash away the sweat and fear of the night, and for the first time in longer than I can remember, I find myself thinking about the day ahead with something like optimism. No voice telling me all the ways things could go wrong. No litany of potential disasters, just plans, possibilities. As I drive to work, I keep waiting for the voice to return, for that familiar critical commentary. But there's only silence and my own thoughts, moving freely for the first time in decades. I know the journey isn't over. 20 years of conditioning won't disappear overnight. I'll probably still check the stove more than once before bed. I'll still worry about presentations and deadlines. That's normal anxiety, normal human concerns. But now, they'll be just thoughts passing through my mind, not amplified by something feeding on my fears, just my own voice, which I can choose to listen to or not. As I park at my office building, I realize I'm smiling. A small, cautious smile, but genuine. For the first time in years, I feel like myself. Wholly, completely myself. And that self, I'm discovering, isn't broken after all. Just healing. Just beginning to discover who I might be when I'm not at war with my own mind. The voice is gone. My thoughts are my own. And the silence in my head has never sounded so beautiful. So there you have it, folks. A journey into the darkest corners of the mind, where sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we carry within us. Have you ever felt like there's a voice inside your head that isn't quite your own? Like your thoughts sometimes feel foreign, almost separate from yourself? Drop a comment below and let me know if any part of Alex's struggle resonated with you. I've found that these internal battles are far more common than most people admit, though hopefully not with actual supernatural entities involved. And if you enjoyed this trip into psychological horror, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss my next story. I've got plenty more tales that explore the thin boundary between mental health struggles and something else. Sweet dreams, everyone. And remember, just because the voice is in your head doesn't mean it's really you. Story number 4. Have you ever felt that eerie sensation of being watched while walking alone in the woods? That prickling feeling on the back of your neck? The sudden silence as all woodland creatures go quiet at once? I never truly understood what that meant until last September, when a weekend camping trip in rural West Virginia turned into the most terrifying experience of my life. What I encountered in those ancient Appalachian forests has haunted my dreams ever since. If you've ever heard whispers about the Flatwoods Monster, I'm here to tell you, those stories barely scratch the surface of the terror. My encounter revealed something far more complex and unsettling than any folklore could capture. I've spent months trying to make sense of what happened, and now I'm finally ready to share it with you all. So dim your lights, get comfortable, and prepare yourself. Because once you hear this story, you might start questioning those strange sounds outside your window at night. Before I begin, make sure to listen all the way to the end. There's a detail I've never shared with anyone that might explain why these creatures have remained hidden for so long. If you've ever experienced something you couldn't explain in the woods, drop it in the comments. Maybe together we can unravel this mystery that's haunted Appalachia for generations. The story begins now. I swear, Mike, if this is another one of your wild goose chases. I sighed, watching the last bars of cell service disappear from my phone as our Jeep ventured deeper into the West Virginia backcountry. The narrow road wound through thick forest, far from the comforts of civilization. Trust me, Alex, Mike grinned, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Seneca Forest has the best fall camping in the entire state. My uncle's cabin is right on the edge of some of the most pristine wilderness you'll ever see. His enthusiasm was infectious, as always. Besides, you're the one always complaining about needing to disconnect. I couldn't argue with that. After months of overtime at the architectural firm in Pittsburgh, a weekend away from emails and project deadlines sounded like heaven, even if it meant following Mike into yet another adventure. "And you're sure this place has electricity?" Jen asked from the back seat, not looking up from her book. My girlfriend had reluctantly agreed to the trip, though she made it clear her idea of roughing it included, at minimum, a working shower. "Yes, it has the basics." Mike chuckled. "Nothing fancy, but running water, electricity, and the best part, no neighbors for miles." Little did we know how that isolation would soon feel less like a perk and more like a trap. The cabin appeared around the bend, a modest A-frame nestled against the backdrop of dense forest with mountains rising in the distance. Fall had transformed the landscape into a tapestry of crimson, gold, and burnt orange. As we unloaded our gear, a crisp breeze carried the earthy scent of decaying leaves. That first afternoon passed pleasantly enough. We hiked a nearby trail, taking pictures of the spectacular fall foliage. On our way back, Mike pointed out an area deeper in the forest where locals had reported strange sightings over the years. "That's Flatwoods territory," he said with a mischievous smile. "Home of the famous monster." Jen rolled her eyes. "Please tell me this isn't why you brought us here." "What's the Flatwoods monster?" I asked, genuinely curious. Mike's eyes lit up. Back in 1952, a group of kids saw a UFO crash nearby. When they went to investigate with some adults, they encountered this tall creature with a round red face, glowing eyes, and a body that gave off a noxious mist. It supposedly made a hissing sound and had clawed hands. "Sounds like a barn owl and mass hysteria to me," Jen said. "Maybe." Mike shrugged. "But people still report seeing something strange in these woods." I laughed it off, but something about the way the forest seemed to darken around us as he spoke sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the autumn air. That evening, we grilled burgers outside and shared stories around a small fire pit. The night was clear, stars punching through the black canvas of sky with remarkable brightness. As our conversation dwindled, I became aware of the profound silence surrounding us. No distant traffic, no airplane noise, just the occasional hoot of an owl and the crackling fire. "Listen to that," I said softly. "To what?" Mike asked. "Exactly, nothing. I haven't experienced silence like this in years." We all paused, letting the quietness envelop us. Then Jen frowned. "Anyone else smell something strange?" I sniffed the air. Beneath the wood smoke there was something metallic, almost like copper or hot electrical wires. "Probably just someone's campfire nearby," Mike suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. The smell faded as quickly as it had appeared, and soon we headed inside. After a couple of beers and more conversation, we decided to turn in early. Mike took the loft, while Jen and I settled into the larger bedroom. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. The digital clock beside the bed had gone dark, suggesting a power outage. Beside me, Jen slept soundly. Something had pulled me from sleep. A sound, perhaps, or just that inexplicable sense that something had changed in our environment. Slipping quietly from bed, I moved to the window and peered out into the darkness. The forest was bathed in silvery moonlight, creating stark shadows between the trees. Nothing seemed amiss, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. Then I saw it. A faint glow emanating from deep within the woods, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Red, then orange, then red again. Curiosity overcame caution. Grabbing my phone for its flashlight and slipping on my boots and jacket, I quietly made my way outside. The chill air hit me like a physical force, and my breath clouded in front of me. The strange light continued its rhythmic pulsing, beckoning me forward. Just a quick look, I whispered to myself. Probably campers or hunters. I stepped off the small porch and headed toward the tree line, my phone's flashlight casting a weak cone of light ahead of me. The smell returned, that metallic, ozone-like scent, stronger now. As I entered the forest, dry leaves crunched beneath my feet, each step sounding impossibly loud in the stillness. The light seemed to be coming from a small clearing about 300 yards in. As I drew closer, the air grew warmer, more humid, despite the autumn chill. Sweat beaded on my forehead. My heart pounded in my chest. Every instinct told me to turn back, yet I pressed forward, drawn by a curiosity I couldn't explain. I reached the edge of the clearing and stopped, frozen in disbelief. The source of the light wasn't a campfire or a hunter's lantern. It was... I still don't have the right words to describe it. A sort of tear in the air itself, oval-shaped, about 7 feet tall, with edges that rippled like heat waves over hot asphalt. The inside of the oval pulsed with that same red-orange light I'd seen from the cabin, but up close, I could see it wasn't a solid color. It swirled and shifted, like looking into a lava lamp. And the smell. God, that smell. Like burning metal and ozone and something else. Something organic and deeply wrong. It made my eyes water and my throat constrict. I stood transfixed, unable to move, unable to process what I was seeing. Was I dreaming? Hallucinating? That's when I heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound coming from the other side of the clearing. Not quite footsteps. More like something being dragged across the forest floor. Slow, deliberate, approaching. I killed my phone's flashlight and crouched behind a large oak tree, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. The dragging sound continued, growing louder, punctuated now by what I can only describe as a wheezing hiss. Then it emerged from the darkness on the far side of the clearing. Even now, months later, I struggle to describe what I saw. Not because the memory has faded, God, I wish it would, but because it defied conventional form. Standing at least 8 feet tall, the figure had a shape vaguely humanoid but wrong in every proportion. Its body seemed encased in a dark, metallic shell, or skin that reflected the pulsing light from the oval tear. Where a head should have been was a large, round shape. Not quite a face, but a flat, circular plane, with 2 enormous eyes that glowed a sickly green. Below this face extended what looked like an accordion-like structure. Not quite a neck, not quite a respirator. With each wheezing sound, this structure expanded and contracted. The creature had no visible mouth that I could discern, but those eyes, they seemed to hold an intelligence that chilled me to my core. Its arms were too long for its body, hanging almost to the ground, ending in what appeared to be 3-fingered hands, with curved, talon-like appendages. It moved with a strange, gliding motion, as if its lower body floated just above the ground. As I watched, paralyzed with terror, the creature approached the glowing oval. It raised one of its long arms and seemed to manipulate something invisible in this air. The pulsing of the light intensified, growing faster, brighter. I must have made some small sound, a gasp, perhaps, or the crunch of a leaf beneath my foot as I shifted my weight. The creature went completely still. Then, with a movement so swift it seemed impossible for its size, it turned its circular face directly toward my hiding place. Those green eyes locked onto me with terrible precision. We stared at each other across the clearing for what felt like an eternity, but was likely only seconds. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even blink. Then it made a sound. A high-pitched electronic wail that bore no resemblance to any animal or machine I'd ever heard. It pierced my ears like physical pain, making me clutch my head in agony. That broke my paralysis. I turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush with no thought for stealth or direction, just away from those eyes, away from that sound, away from the wrongness of what I'd seen. Behind me, I heard movement, fast, heavy thuds that couldn't possibly belong to anything natural. The creature was pursuing me. I ran blindly through the dark forest, branches whipping my face, roots threatening to trip me with every step. My lungs burned, my legs screamed with exertion. But terror drove me forward, even as I realized with growing horror that I had no idea which direction the cabin lay. The sounds of pursuit grew closer. That metallic smell grew stronger, and with it came a new scent, something acrid and sulfurous that made my eyes water and throat close. I risked a glance over my shoulder and immediately wished I hadn't. The creature was only about 30 yards behind me, moving with that same gliding speed that seemed impossible for its size. But worse, far worse, was what appeared to be happening to the air around it. It seemed to ripple and distort, as if reality itself couldn't quite maintain its integrity in the creature's presence. I faced forward again just in time to see the ground drop away before me, a steep ravine cutting through the forest floor. I tried to stop, but my momentum carried me forward, sending me tumbling down the slope in a painful cascade of dirt, leaves, and small rocks. I landed hard at the bottom. The wind knocked from my lungs. Pain shot through my right ankle. For a moment, I lay there, dazed and gasping for breath. Then I heard it, that wheezing hiss, closer now. At the top of the ravine stood the creature, its green eyes fixed on me, the circular face tilted as if in curiosity. It began to descend the slope, not by tumbling as I had, but by floating downward in a controlled, terrifying glide. Panic gave me new strength. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the pain in my ankle, and limped as fast as I could along the bottom of the ravine. It was some kind of dried creek bed, I realized, narrow but thankfully free of dense underbrush. I don't know how long I fled through that darkness, the sounds of pursuit always just behind me, never quite catching up but never falling far enough behind to give me hope. My world narrowed to the rhythm of my labored breathing, the pounding of my heart, the pain with each step on my injured ankle. Then, through the trees ahead, I saw light. Warm, yellow, electric light. The cabin. Somehow, miraculously, I'd circled back toward it. With renewed energy, I pushed forward, bursting from the tree line into the small clearing around the cabin. "Mike! Jen!" I screamed, my voice hoarse and ragged. "Help!" I risked another glance behind me. The creature had stopped at the edge of the forest, its green eyes gleaming in the darkness between the trees. It made no move to follow me into the open space around the cabin, but I could feel its gaze tracking me. The cabin door flew open, spilling more light into the yard. Mike stood silhouetted in the doorway, looking confused and alarmed. "Alex? What the hell?" "Inside," I gasped, limping up the steps of the porch. "Get inside." Mike grabbed my arm, helping me through the door, which he quickly closed behind us. Jen was there too, hair tousled from sleep, eyes wide with concern and confusion. "What happened to you?" she demanded, taking in my disheveled appearance. Clothes torn, face scratched from branches, covered in dirt and leaves. "There's something out there," I panted, collapsing onto the couch. Something not natural, not human. Mike and Jen exchanged a look I knew too well, concern mixed with skepticism. "I'm not crazy," I insisted, my voice cracking. I saw it, the Flatwoods monster, or something like it, in a clearing with this light, like a tear in reality. You saw the Flatwoods monster? Mike's eyebrows shot up. I know how it sounds, but a sudden, high-pitched electronic wail cut through the night, the same terrible sound I'd heard in the clearing. It seemed to vibrate through the walls of the cabin, making the windows rattle in their frames. Mike and Jen froze, their faces draining of color. "What the hell was that?" Mike whispered. "That's it," I said, my voice barely audible. "That's what's chasing me." The wail faded, leaving behind a silence so complete it seemed to press against our eardrums. We stood motionless, hardly daring to breathe, straining to hear any sound from outside. "Maybe it was just some kind of bird," Jen suggested weakly. Or a mechanical sound from one of the other cabins. "There are no other cabins for miles," Mike reminded her, his usual bravado notably absent. I limped to the window, carefully peering out into the darkness. The yard appeared empty, bathed in moonlight. The tree line stood dark and impenetrable about 50 yards away. I saw nothing unusual until I noticed something odd about the shadows beneath the trees. They seemed to be moving independently of the branches above, shifting and flowing in a way that defied the laws of physics. And within those moving shadows I caught glimpses of something solid, something tall and otherworldly. "It's still out there," I whispered, "watching." Mike joined me at the window. "I don't see anything. Look at the shadows under the trees. They're wrong." He squinted, then his body went rigid. "Holy shit," he breathed. Jen remained rooted in the center of the room, arms wrapped around herself. "This isn't funny, guys." "We're not joking," I said, not taking my eyes from the anomalous shadows. "We need to leave. Now. Get in the Jeep and drive as fast as we can back to the main road." Mike nodded, his face pale. "Keys are on the hook by the door. Let's grab our phones and wallets and go, leave everything else." As Mike turned toward the door, the lights flickered once, twice, then went out, plunging the cabin into darkness. The sudden absence of the refrigerator's hum made the silence even more complete. "Power's out," Jen stated, her voice tight with fear. "Use your phones for light," Mike said. "Stay together." The faint glow of our phone screens created small islands of light in the darkness. We moved toward the door, Mike leading the way. He reached for the knob, then hesitated. "What if it's right outside?" "We can't stay here," I insisted. "That thing? I don't think it's going to just go away." Mike took a deep breath, then pulled the door open in one quick motion. Cool night air rushed in, carrying with it that now familiar metallic smell, stronger than before. The porch and yard remained empty, but now I could clearly see movement in the tree line. Shadows detaching themselves from the forest's edge, sliding across the open ground toward the cabin. Not one shadow, but many. 3, maybe 4 distinct shapes, all moving with that same gliding motion I'd witnessed earlier. "Run!" I shouted. "To the Jeep! Now!" We burst from the cabin, sprinting across the yard toward where we'd parked. My injured ankle sent spikes of pain up my leg with each step, but adrenaline pushed me forward. Behind us, I heard that wheezing hiss, multiplied now, coming from multiple directions at once. Mike reached the Jeep first, fumbling with the keys. Jen was right behind him. I lagged behind, limping as fast as I could. "Come on!" Jen screamed. Holding the back door open for me, I glanced over my shoulder and immediately wished I hadn't. The creatures, at least 3 of them, had emerged fully from the forest. In the moonlight, their metallic skin gleamed dully. Those green eyes seemed to float in the darkness, fixed on our escape attempt. One of them raised a long arm, talon-like fingers extended. The air around its hand seemed to warp and bend. A sudden force struck me from behind, like an invisible wave, knocking me forward onto my hands and knees. Pain shot through my already injured ankle, and my phone flew from my hand, skittering across the ground. "Alex!" Jen screamed. I tried to stand, but another invisible wave hit me, harder this time, pressing me flat against the earth. I couldn't move, couldn't even lift my head. It felt as if gravity had increased tenfold around my body alone. Through my peripheral vision, I saw the creatures gliding closer, their circular faces tilted downward toward me with that same terrible curiosity. "Drive!" I managed to shout. "Get help!" "We're not leaving you," Mike yelled back. I heard the Jeep's door slam and footsteps running toward me. "No, stay back!" I tried to warn them, but it was too late. The same invisible force struck them both, sending them sprawling to the ground several yards away from me. All three of us now lay pinned, helpless, as the creatures approached. They formed a triangle around us, those green eyes examining us with cold, alien intelligence. The air grew thick with that metallic, sulfurous smell, making it difficult to breathe. My lungs burned. My vision began to blur. The tallest of the creatures moved closer to me, leaning down until its circular face was only feet from mine. This close, I could see that what I'd taken for a flat, featureless plane was actually covered in hundreds of tiny, shifting plates, like the compound eye of an insect, but metallic. The green glow emanated from deep within this structure, pulsing in time with the accordion-like movement of its neck. It made a series of clicks and hisses that somehow conveyed meaning, though not in any language I recognized. The other creatures responded with similar sounds. They were communicating. About us. About what to do with us. I felt a pressure in my head, not physical, but mental. A sensation of something pushing against the boundaries of my consciousness, trying to get in. Images flashed before my eyes too quickly to process, accompanied by emotions that weren't my own. Curiosity, confusion, and something close to excitement? The creature examining me extended one of its three-fingered hands toward my face. I tried to scream, tried to move, but remained paralyzed by that invisible force. The talon-like finger stopped just short of touching my forehead. Then, from somewhere in the forest, came a new sound. A low, thrumming vibration that I felt more than heard. The creatures immediately straightened, their circular faces turning toward the source of the sound. The pressure holding us down suddenly vanished. I gasped, my lungs filling with air. The creatures began moving backward, retreating toward the forest, their attention no longer on us, but on whatever had made that thrumming sound. It was growing louder, deeper, making the ground beneath us vibrate. "Run," I croaked, struggling to my feet, while they're distracted. We scrambled into the Jeep, Mike gunning the engine before all the doors were fully closed. The headlights illuminated the yard, and the creatures, now moving rapidly toward the forest, their forms seeming to flicker and distort in the artificial light. Mike threw the Jeep into reverse, executing a wild turn that sent gravel flying, then shifted and accelerated down the narrow driveway toward the main road. I twisted in my seat, looking back through the rear window. The creatures had reached the edge of the forest, but stopped there, those green eyes still visible in the darkness, watching our retreat. Above the tree line, a soft, pulsing glow had appeared, similar to what I'd seen in the clearing, but larger, brighter. As we rounded a bend in the driveway, the cabin and its unearthly visitors disappeared from view. The night returned to silence except for the sound of our labored breathing and the Jeep's engine as we sped toward the main road. The 3-hour drive back to Pittsburgh passed in a blur of adrenaline and exhaustion. We stopped only once, at a gas station outside of Clarksburg, where the fluorescent lights and sleepy attendant provided a surreal contrast to what we'd just experienced. "We should report this," Mike said as we got back on the highway. "Call the police, or, I don't know, some government agency." "And tell them what?" Jen asked. "That we saw the Flatwoods monster? That aliens tried to abduct us? They'll think we're crazy." We tried to resume our normal lives. I returned to my architectural drafting, Mike to his IT job, Jen to her classes. We met frequently, talking in circles about that night, searching for explanations. Sleep became my enemy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those glowing green eyes, felt that pressure in my mind. I began to dread the darkness, keeping lights on throughout my apartment at night. About 2 weeks after our encounter, strange things began to happen. Small at first, electronics malfunctioning around me, digital clocks resetting, my phone battery draining inexplicably fast. Then more noticeable, a persistent metallic taste in my mouth, occasional disorientation, moments where time seemed to skip forward like a scratched record. Mike and Jen reported similar experiences. We compared symptoms like patients diagnosed with the same rare disease, finding comfort in the shared nature of our condition. Then the dreams started. Not nightmares, exactly, but vivid, complex visions of places that couldn't possibly exist. Landscapes with impossible geometries, structures that defied physics, colors that had no names in any human language. And always at the edges of these dreams, those green eyes watched, waiting, evaluating. 1 month after our encounter, Mike disappeared. He left for work on a Tuesday morning and simply never arrived. His car was found that evening, parked neatly in a rest area along Interstate 79. Keys still in the ignition. His phone and wallet on the passenger seat. No signs of struggle. Just gone. The police investigation went nowhere. Without evidence of a crime, they classified it as a voluntary disappearance. But Jen and I knew better. We felt it with a certainty that transcended logic. Whatever had happened in those woods had come back for Mike. Jen and I grew closer in our shared grief and fear. The metallic taste grew stronger. The dream landscapes more detailed. The sense of being watched more persistent. 2 months after Mike vanished, Jen made a discovery that changed everything. While looking through photos from that weekend, she found an image taken just as sunset was fading on our first day at the cabin. In the background, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it, was a blurry shape at the edge of the forest. Tall, vaguely humanoid, with what appeared to be a circular head. "It was watching us the entire time," she whispered, her voice trembling. I stared at the image, a cold certainty settling over me. They're still watching us now. We decided to visit Flatwoods itself, the small West Virginia town where the original monster sighting had occurred in 1952. If there were answers to be found, perhaps they'd be there. We visited a small museum dedicated to the 1952 sighting. The similarities to our experience were undeniable, though separated by more than 70 years. The museum's elderly caretaker noticed our intense interest. "You folks had an encounter, didn't you?" she asked quietly after the other visitors had left. Neither of us answered immediately, shocked by her directness. She nodded, taking our silence as confirmation. "You're not the first to come looking for answers. Won't be the last either." "You believe us?" Jen asked hesitantly. "Honey, I've lived in these mountains for 82 years. Most folks around here have either had an experience themselves or know someone who has. We just don't talk about it much. Outsiders think we're just superstitious hillbillies." She led us to a back room filled with handwritten journals, old photographs, newspaper clippings, and odd artifacts. Small metallic objects of unknown origin, strange crystalline formations, botanical specimens unlike any plant I'd ever seen. This is 70 years of documented encounters throughout these mountains. Most never made the papers. We spent hours going through the materials, finding account after account that mirrored our experience in sometimes shocking detail. The metallic smell, the sensation of being watched, the after effects, the taste, the dreams, the electrical disturbances. "What are they?" I finally asked. "Aliens? Interdimensional beings?" The caretaker shrugged. "Does it matter what label we put on them? They're here. They've always been here, long before white settlers came to these mountains. The native peoples had their stories about them. But what do they want?" Jen pressed. Why did they take our friend? Want? That assumes they think like us, want like us. The old woman's eyes grew distant. Maybe they're just curious. Maybe they're studying us, the way scientists study ants. Or maybe, she hesitated. Maybe what? I prompted. Maybe they're preparing us, changing us, little by little, to perceive things our brains weren't designed to perceive, to understand realities beyond our limited dimensions. Changing us how? Jen's voice wavered. The caretaker fixed her with a penetrating gaze. You already know. You feel it, don't you? The shifts in perception. The dreams of impossible places. The sense that the world around you isn't quite as solid as you once believed. I felt a chill run through me because she was right. Since that night in the woods, my perception had been expanding. Colors seemed more vibrant, with subtle gradations I'd never noticed before. Occasionally, out of the corner of my eye, I could see the faintest ripple in what should be solid objects, as if reality itself was a thin membrane capable of being disturbed by unseen forces. Your friend, the caretaker continued, he didn't disappear, he transcended. They opened his mind fully to what you've only glimpsed. He's still here, in a sense, just operating on a different frequency now. On the drive home, as darkness fell and the mountains faded into shadow behind us, Jen suddenly gasped, pointing out her window. Look! In the sky above the distant ridgeline, a soft, pulsing light hung suspended. Red-orange, just like the tear in reality I'd seen in the forest clearing. Even from miles away, I could feel a resonance with it, a pull that made something deep within me respond. Without discussing it, I pulled the car onto the shoulder of the highway. We got out, standing in the cool night air, watching the light pulse and shift. They're not going to leave us alone, are they? Jen whispered. I don't think they can, I replied. And I'm not sure we want them to. Because the truth, the terrifying, exhilarating truth, was that part of me yearned to understand what Mike was now experiencing. Despite the fear, despite the trauma, I felt a pull toward something larger than myself. 2 weeks later, we drove back to Seneca Forest, to the clearing where I'd first seen the tear in reality. The winter woods were silent, branches bare against the night sky. Our breath clouded before us as we walked, following no path but some internal compass that drew us unerringly toward our destination. In the center of the clearing, the air rippled, then parted. The tear appeared, that same oval of pulsing red-orange light I'd seen months ago, but this time I perceived it differently, not just as a visual phenomenon, but as a complex, multidimensional structure that existed in ways my human perception could only partially grasp. They're coming, I said, knowing it with absolute certainty. Jen nodded, her face calm despite the extraordinary circumstances. I know. We stood side by side as the first of the creatures emerged from the tear. Tall, with that circular, compound face and glowing green eyes. Behind it came others, surrounding us with their presence. The tallest approached, its circular face tilted in acknowledgement. It raised one of its long, three-fingered hands, and this time, I didn't flinch away. They want to show us something, Jen murmured beside me. I nodded. I think they're going to show us where Mike is. The creature's hand stopped inches from my forehead. I felt that now familiar pressure against my consciousness, but instead of resisting, I welcomed it. The boundary between my mind and something vast, ancient, and utterly inhuman began to dissolve. Images flooded my awareness, realities stacked upon realities, dimensions intersecting in patterns of breathtaking complexity. And within this infinite tapestry I perceived something familiar, a consciousness that retained echoes of my friend Mike, but expanded, transformed, integrated into something far beyond human. He was aware of us, happy in a way that transcended ordinary human happiness, and he was waiting. The connection ended, the creature lowering its hand. but the understanding remained. "They're inviting us," I said to Jen, whose eyes were wide with wonder, "to become intermediaries. Beings who can exist in both realities, who can translate between worlds that have been separate for too long." The creatures moved back, creating a path toward the glowing tear at the center of the clearing. An invitation, not a demand. Jen took my hand, her fingers warm against mine in the winter chill. "Are we ready for this?" I looked at her, then at the pulsing doorway to another level of existence. "I don't think anyone is ever truly ready, but we've been chosen for a reason." Together, we stepped forward, toward the light, toward understanding, toward a reality more vast and strange and beautiful than we had ever imagined. As the boundaries of our known world dissolved around us, one final thought crystallized in my mind. The Flatwoods monster wasn't a monster at all. It was a messenger, a guide. And now, in some incomprehensible way, it was becoming part of us, as we were becoming part of it. A bridge between worlds, built one transformed human at a time. If you've made it this far into my story, you might be wondering if this is just fiction, a tale spun to entertain, to send those pleasant chills down your spine before you drift off to sleep. I wish I could tell you that it was. But here's the detail I've never shared until now. The transformation doesn't end. It continues, evolving in ways both subtle and profound. Even now, as I share this account with you, I exist between realities. So, tonight, as you lie in bed listening to this story, pay attention to that prickling sensation on the back of your neck, that metallic taste that might suddenly appear on your tongue, the subtle distortions in the familiar shadows of your room. It might just be your imagination, triggered by a spooky story. Or it might be something else, an invitation, a first contact, the beginning of your own transformation. Sweet dreams, my friends. And remember, if you ever find yourself in the forests of Appalachia, and you sense something watching you from between the trees, don't run. Listen, if you've experienced anything strange in the forests, lights you couldn't explain, time that seemed to slip away, or that distinctive metallic taste, share your story in the comments below. And if this account has given you a glimpse beyond the ordinary, subscribe for more revelations from the spaces between worlds. There's so much more to share with those who are ready to hear it.